Learning target G starts with section 9.3, says to evaluate trig functions of any angle using all 6 trig functions. So this is when you potentially, or most of the time, are not on the unit circle. So you just need to know any angle in standard position. Again, if you look at the y value is the opposite, the x value is the adjacent, and the r, the radius, is your hypotenuse. So once you draw that angle in standard position, so then you need to know that the sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse, y over r. We kind of already talked about that in learning target A. And the cosine is the adjacent leg over the hypotenuse, x over r. Tangent is y over x, opposite over adjacent. And then all of the reciprocal ones, cotangent, just take x over y. Secant is the reciprocal of this one, you take r over x. Cosecant is the reciprocal of the sine, you take r over y. So what they will give you is they'll give you an ordered pair. They'll say there's a point 5,2 that the terminal side is on. So if I go 5 over and 2 down, I know that this terminal side contains that point. So my x value is 5, my y value is -2. I need to use Pythagorean theorem to find the radius. So 5 squared plus -2 squared equals r squared. 4 plus 25 is 29, so r is the square root of 29. I can't simplify that. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. So if I can't, I just leave it as the square root of 29. So then it says you have to find all 6 trig functions and in exact form. So in other words, you aren't using your calculator. So I know that when I take the sine, I'm going to take the opposite over the hypotenuse, or y over r. And again, I need to rationalize that denominator, so I need to multiply by radical 29 over radical 29. So I get 2 radical 29 in the numerator, and I get 29 in the denominator. So again, I didn't show that step because I was running out of room, but I just multiplied by square root of 29 over square root of 29. The cosine is the adjacent leg, or x, over the hypotenuse. So x over r. So again, if I multiply by square root of 29 over square root of 29, I get 5 square root of 29 over 29. Tangent is opposite over adjacent, so -2 over 5, and that can't be reduced, -2/5. Then I just need to know the reciprocals. So the tangent and cotangent are reciprocals. So all I need to do to find the cotangent is flip this. It becomes 5 over -2 or -5 over 2. Doesn't matter where you put the negative sign. If you write this as 5 over -2, that's totally fine. All right, cosecant is the reciprocal of the sine, so I would flip this right here. So instead of taking y over r, I'm going to take r over y. That can't be reduced. Secant is the reciprocal of the cosine, so instead of taking x over r, I take r over x. And again, that can't be simplified. So again, you just have to be able to know that this ordered pair is your x and your y. You need to find r, and then you need to know all of your trig values. Either know it as SOHCAHTOA, opposite over hypotenuse, adjacent over hypotenuse, opposite over adjacent, or know it in terms of y and r. So the sine of an angle is always the y value over the r value because it's the opposite over the adjacent. All right, so that's on G. If you look at H, H says to be able to sketch an angle in the correct quadrant and its reference angle if it's given in degrees or radians. And radians probably is the new piece to this to make sure you know how to sketch it in radians. So if you're asked to sketch 7 pi over 5, so you can either convert that to degrees, or I think it's easier to think of it in radians and say, all right, if I go to here, that's pi. Well, pi, 1 pi is right here. Pi is 5/5 pi. 5 over 5 is 1. So I know I go 5/5 to get to here. I have to go 2 more fifths of a pi to get to there. Now remember, half of a pi is down here, so 2.5 pi over 5 would be here. That's half of 5. So anything over 2.5 would push me into the 4th quadrant. Anything less than 2.5, I stay in the 3rd quadrant. So 5 pi gets me here. I have to go 2 more fifths of a pi, which is less than a half a pi, so I'm in this quadrant. Then I know the reference angle right away. Reference angle is 2 pi over 5. Because again, it's the difference between 5/5, and I had to go 2 more fifths to get to there. So my reference angle is 2 pi over 5. If you're in degrees, I said 280, so I know there's 270 to here. I have to go 10 more than that, so I'm in the 4th quadrant. To find my reference angle, though, remember reference angle has to be with the x-axis. So I have to take 360 if I went all the way around the circle and subtract the 280. And I found out my reference angle there is 80. So you need to be able to sketch in either case and give me the reference angle. If I give it to you in radians, you can convert that to degrees, but then you have to take your reference angle and convert it back to radians. So there'd be some converting. It would be a lot more work, but you could do it if you don't like radians. All right. I says to find and use reference angles to evaluate trig functions. So here's where after you draw the picture of 120 degrees, you need to find the reference angle. Reference angle will be something now that you know. It's 30, 60, or 45. So it's 60 degrees. So now I know that I have a triangle, a 30, 60. I need to know that, okay, with a 60-degree angle, the side opposite that is radical 3 over 2. The adjacent leg is half the hypotenuse because that's opposite of 30. It's a half. So it's 60 degrees. Since this side angle up here is 30, this side would be a half long. This would be the square root of 3 times that, so square root of 3 over 2. Now the important part is to know because it's in this quadrant, I went to the left and then I went up. So that's why my x value is negative 1/2 and the y value is square root of 3 over 2. So when I go to grade these, I will look, are you in the right quadrant? Do you have the right reference angle? Do you have the right ordered pair? You can either show me here or you can show me on the triangle. And then do you take the right trig function? So when it says secant, secant's the reciprocal of the cosine. And the cosine is the x value over the r value. So it's just negative 1/2. So when I want to find the secant, I'm going to take negative 1 over 2 and I'm going to flip it. So it's going to become negative 2 over 1, or just negative 2. So I will look to see that you got the right trig function. All right, for tangent of negative 2 pi over 3, here's negative 2 pi over 3. All the way to there would be 3/3, negative 3/3. So my reference angle is pi over 3. So I went 2/3, another third would have gotten me up to here. So that's my reference angle. So again, are you in the right quadrant? Do you have the right reference angle? Pi over 3, because pi is 180. 180 divided by 3 is 60. So the ordered pairs that go with 60 degrees here means that the side opposite the 30 would be a half, so negative 1/2. And then the side opposite, which is the y, opposite the 60, is radical 3 over 2. Now they're both negative. I went left and down. So they're both negative. All right, so I'd be looking to see, do you have the right reference angle? Do you have the right ordered pair? Then from your ordered pair, do you know tangent is the y value over the x value? It's the opposite over the adjacent. So that would, I would give you a point if you knew that. Then you have to simplify. You need to know that the 2's will always cancel out. So I have negative radical 3 over negative 1, which reduces to positive radical 3. That you can reduce that correctly. Okay, so with all of these, you have to be able to draw the angle. You have to know what the reference angle is. You have to know the ordered pairs that go with that reference angle. And then you have to know those 6 trig functions, whichever one I ask for, that you can set it up, and possibly you may have to be able to simplify that. All right, and then real quick, is just being able to set up a word problem maybe that's more on the unit circle or on a circle. It doesn't have to be the unit circle. This one says you have a bike. It starts on the ground, then you walk your bike, so your tire is going to rotate 120 degrees counterclockwise. If you have 26-inch tire diameter, how high above the ground is that mark? So now you're going from here, you're going to go 120 degrees, and it wants to know how high that is above the ground. So my reference angle, again, if I want 120, is 60. And so I know the x value is half of the hypotenuse, because that's opposite the 30, so that's 13. The side opposite the 60 is 13 times the square root of 3. So I know that then y is going to be 22.5 inches. Starting here, going 120 degrees, I want to know what is that y value. So there are a couple other examples you might want to look at, but again, I wouldn't worry too much about these. It's a matter of just, can you set it up, and then it's going to be similar to what you did up here. So it's really more important, can you do this piece to solve a problem? And then if we give you something, we'll probably give you a picture of it that you can decide where's the right triangle and be able to solve that. So just make sure you know I. That's probably the most important learning target.